Hey kid, you want to buy some strike vests?
That's right, it's time to talk about the strike vests used by Delta Force in the 80s and the 90s and even the 2000s. We're gonna go through the reproduction manufacturers that you can buy from to get good copies or really bad copies of these. Now I have 3 examples here, but there are a couple more. There is one that I am gonna touch on that is absolutely worth mentioning, but the 3 that I have kind of encompass the cheapest to the most expensive. So let's flip this camera down to the table and let's get looking. So let's talk about the first and probably the most common that you'll see on the first or secondhand market. And truthfully, nowadays, you're not gonna really see these sold. They're not really produced as far as I know, but once in a while, for a good deal, you'll see them pop up on eBay or Facebook or whatever. And this is the Toy Soldier. This is the cheapest of a bunch, originally retailing for around that $30 to $40 price range. Oh, and by the way, 8 Fields is another manufacturer that did something very similar to this. I'm gonna loop them in kind of in the same bracket. I believe 8 Fields is still available though. And that one is also around that $30 price range. But when I say this is the absolutely cheapest of the bunch, I mean that both financially and materials wise. This has all the regular features that you'll see. You got the radio pouches, the magazine pouches, and everything like that. One of the first things you'll notice is how rough cut and misshapen everything is. On the edge of this Toy Soldier example, you'll see a very sharp cut jagged edge that was just kind of burned. It wasn't professionally done. And each of the pouches is attached with sort of a rounded binding here, which is not necessarily correct to the original. We'll talk about what that looks like on a real one, but it's definitely not this very well-rounded curve. The buckles are incredibly cheap, flimsy plastic that are not even Nexus marked. The material is incredibly cheap and flimsy, and even though this is probably 500 to 1,000 denier Cordura, but there are way too many corners cut, literally. And that's not even mentioning the most egregious part of this chest rig. This is not based on one that was used during the Battle of Mogadishu or, of course, Panama. This is based on the latest generation, or that Gen 3 strike vest. These buckles up front came on the Gen 2, but this style of shoulder strap, of course, is based on the Gen 3. And GMB Solutions has a great video going over all the different iterations, so I'll leave those details to him. I would highly recommend you go check out that video, but for now, just know that even though this is the cheapest option on the market, it's also just not correct in its construction. Another common complaint is that the magazine pouches, when filled to capacity with 1 rifle mag and 2 pistol mags, will not actually fit all of those together. Oftentimes, you have to choose one or the other. In my personal experience, that wasn't an issue with this particular one, but it is such a common complaint, I believe I got the lemon where it actually works right. And with that, let's compare to the next level up. Here is my chest rig from Shekin Gears. You'll notice it already looks just a little bit different. This actually has never been used by me, but I did make a minor modification to it. You can buy 2 different versions on the website. You can buy a black thread, which would be more correct, or a white thread. And I purchased this as a backup before I even knew that little tidbit there. So obviously, these threads are not white. I went over them with some Sharpie, and as you can tell, it creates a much more realistic look. That white threading did come from the idea that they would fade over time because it was such cheaply dyed thread that it did become a white color, but it wasn't seen on these original examples. And even if they did, they weren't such a stark white that they shone through all the black. So having a clean white thread on the entirety of this piece was not correct, and that's why I went over with Sharpie. Before we get to the differences, let's get to the similarities. This one is a little bit closer in the idea of a Gen 2, where it's got things like the proper shoulder pads. But even then, it's still not rocking the correct Nexus buckles. The ends of straps, if they're not folded over, are pretty poorly cut, and the corners are some of the most egregious. These binding edges are done perpendicularly. It's not one continuous piece that wraps around. And while I did see an example that does have multiple pieces like this, I believe that's just a shortcut from the rigger who originally made that one piece. In most of the other examples that I've been able to see close-up photos, it's more one piece rounded all the way around. Shekin does boast 1,000 denier Cordura, and the real one being 500 denier does make this a little bit wrong in materials, but it's nothing terribly egregious unless you have it in hand and you know what you're looking at. Regardless, this chest rig goes for a lot more money, coming in at about $85 to $90. And please, for the love of God, do not buy the OD green one. Regardless, this would be probably the most common on the market. You'll see these with a ton of impressionists, and even though there are some farbisms with it, it's not the worst to have. From 10 feet away, you're probably not going to be able to notice an immediate difference. And now let's get to that example that I don't have in hand, unfortunately, but is probably the second best, if not on par with the best. And that's coming from Squadron Sew Shop. I'm gonna put a picture of his chest rig here, but his chest rig, while I don't have the pricing on hand because I don't want to misquote his stuff, it's definitely one of the higher quality ones, but getting it is a little more challenging. Between tariffs and everything going on with Russia right now, it's gonna take you a bit to get it, but he does produce very high quality replicas in general. So having an example from Squadron Sew Shop isn't a bad idea for your kit at all. But now let's get to the top tier. And this is a chest rig that also has to be custom ordered by an individual named GMB Solutions. I've shown this chest rig off in a recent video, and I also talked about procuring it, but to give you the quick rundown here, I had to purchase the fabric material and the buckle separately and send it to him. But that does allow me to get a much more period accurate product, because this is 80s dated Nutria brown fabric, and I have all 1989 Nexus buckles, something that's not seen on pretty much any of the other reproductions. You have proper spacing of pouches. You can see that the pouches are lined with binding that is properly rounded and one single piece, as opposed to multiple, and this follows suit all throughout the rest of the chest rig. And my favorite thing is the materials used. I'm gonna give you a quick rundown on some of the materials used in this that are original that GMB Solutions was able to identify. These include the Mil-T5038 Type 4 for the top straps, a Mil-T5038 Type 3 for this binding edging, the OD Green Velcro, CS Osborne 00 grommets, and my favorite detail is the cotton elastic. Not the nylon elastic, but the correct cotton material that the riggers would have used back then. And this all comes from his videos. This level of detail is absolutely unbeaten in the reproduction sphere. You will have to wait a little bit. It's really not that bad, especially because he's in the US. And aside from gathering materials, the cost is only the production of it. And hands down, this is by far one of the best reproductions that you can get, because not only is the attention to detail there for materials, but also period accurate styles. Like, as you can tell for this Gen 1 chest rig, there are no buckles up here, up front, only on the sides to connect the shoulder strap and one on the rear for the waist. So if you get the chance to pick up a really nice piece like this, I would highly recommend it. And while we could talk about the one that AWS does sell currently, just know that it is similar in style to the Toy Soldier one, where it's the Type 3 and not correct for any of the early stuff. So if you did want to get one that's a little more accurate to the impression and spend your money a little more wisely than just getting a readily available option, go with one of the custom riggers. It's more authentic to the rigger style anyway. But regardless, this is the Gear.Locker. Thank you guys for checking out the video. If you're any more curious about these and you want to see more up close photos or whatnot, join the Discord below. And of course, join the Patreon if you want more exclusive videos. We'll see you guys in the next one.
Hello. You may be here for Delta content, and you probably have been enjoying a lot of what you've been seeing. However, things are changing around here. Yeah, I've been into the Vietnam stuff for a while, and I started the channel to talk about KSK gear. And I'm not saying that's changing, but there is a lot of other stuff I want to talk about. So if you've made it this far, I know you're a true fan of the channel. Thank you. What I would encourage you to do is stick around. There's a lot of stuff coming up that's not necessarily Delta Gear related, or some of it's not even KSK or Vietnam. There's so much exciting stuff happening in the behind the scenes on this channel that a lot of the Patreon guys get to see, but you guys are gonna start seeing in the near future too. So this is the Gear.Locker. Thanks for sticking this far, and hopefully you enjoyed this common experience. Let's get back to relaxing.